Hello, and welcome back to another episode here at the SteelerFairy.com podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Kohlman. You know me as Smith is Smoking on the message boards, joined by the best co-hosts that money can and cannot buy. Wil Masisak, you know him as Bradshaw to Ben, and Korey Karbowsky, you know him as Corey39. Gentlemen, we're not even going to talk about said wild card loss. There's nothing to really talk about because we have something breaking news to discuss.
Here's something worse to talk about.
Yeah, I was about to say we're going to get to that. Um, we had this thing called Mike Tomlin finally stepped away after 19 years. We were so psyched. All of us were like, yes, change. All right. We bring in all these great candidates, Nate Shieldhouse, Chris Shula, Brian Flores, list goes on and on. But the person we ended up hiring this was his only option, and we gave it to Mike McCarthy. So Mike McCarthy is your new head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't really know where to start other than this has got Art Rooney's fingerprints all over this hire. Like just total, oh, well, he's a Pittsburgh guy, so we should hire the Pittsburgh guy. Wil, I'm going to throw it to you first because you've been in Pittsburgh before. You know the town and everything. I mean, what does this hire say to you?
It says they didn't want any changes to happen. Like our reasoning for, and I think I say most of the people who were interested in Mike Tomlin being replaced were interested in them trying something different instead of the same thing over and over again that wasn't working. And this hire just screams, we think everything is working except for just the personalities that were in the room. We're going to change them out and bring somebody new in. That's a different version of the same thing we had. It'll be stability. Having had some time to think about it for a few hours, I can think of a couple of things that may be positive about it. But in general, I think of the available choices and considering that there was no rush to reach out and hire him, he wasn't like in contention for some other job. Then I just don't really understand it.
Yeah, Korey, I'm gonna let you build off that, brother.
Yeah, we really liked Shula and Shieldhouse. Like a lot of people did. They're young candidates. They're kind of cutting edge. I think the one thing that really gets me with McCarthy is like I was skeptical of Flores because I was like, he's shown that he couldn't really build a staff, kind of in Miami, like nothing crazy like that. I felt like that was going to be one of the positives of like Shula even being a defensive coach that he could bring in an OC from that McVay tree. He's intimately familiar with a lot of those guys. You got to remember with McCarthy, you're really hiring a head coach and an offensive coordinator because everywhere he's been, it's been an issue with him calling. There's been an issue with him calling the plays, and where in Green Bay and in Dallas, they've talked about how Mike McCarthy refuses to step down from play calling. You can look it up, Mike McCarthy play calling. There's article after article about it from multiple stops. So you really just hired your OC and your head coach all in one. The big complaints about the conservative play calling is going to look extremely similar offensively as it has for the past 7 years now, which I think is just like, it's just super, super discouraging. And you just kind of wonder how they got there. It's like, sure, you could bring in Brian Flores as a DC. You could have brought in Jesse Minter as a DC, but with Mike McCarthy at head coach and calling plays, is going to look like the same exact team. So the only way for me to really kind of perk up to this hire, because the issue is like we get to the playoffs and we have good records and we don't win. And it's because of how we call plays and because of our offensive philosophy. The only way for me to get up for this hire is going to be if McCarthy isn't calling plays and we bring in this newer kind of cutting edge OC. And you're still going to deal with the issue of, if they're really that good of an OC, they're probably going to get hired up. But I don't think we're going to hire someone cutting edge. I don't think McCarthy's going to give up play calling. So I really don't give a damn about the rest of it.
Well, Steeler Nation, you've basically gotten our thoughts in 5 minutes. No, we're going to talk a little longer about this. Don't worry. Just genuine disappointment is how I would describe it. Like personally, I've been having a great football week. My Hoosiers win the national championship, and we're ascending to, the class of college football. And it feels like the Steelers are heading the complete opposite direction. As far as I mean, don't get me wrong. I didn't want them to reach out to Kurt Signetti, but I would have at least been happy if they would have done so. For them to settle on Mike McCarthy after all of these guys that we've briefly mentioned, like I was really hoping we'd get Chris Schuler or Nate Scheelhaus. I've said on here a million times before, I love the Rams offense. But bringing Scheelhaus over would have been great for this team just because we could have finally got out of the basement when it came to offensive philosophy, like you guys have alluded to. So I was really thinking, and honestly, that this hire bucks the hiring trends of the Pittsburgh Steelers. We have always gone after like a young up and coming, like I think it's 3 defensive coordinators were Noel, Tomlin, and Cowers, like all defensive guys. We had the opportunity to do that. We had the opportunity to interview Minter, Shula, Flores, who's actually been a head coach before, who I would have been perfectly fine with over Mike McCarthy. I'm not going to lie, because at least he's been a few places where the offense hasn't been dog shit, and actually looked like a modern NFL offense. I mean, for the past few years, he's been with Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota. Minnesota's offense has been very good when they've had a quarterback. This past year was a bit of a throwaway with the whole McCarthy, Wentz, and God, what's that Minnesota Brosmer? I mean, it's not like you could see offensive tape there this year that well, but the system overall has been very good. So yeah, just genuine disappointment that Mike McCarthy is the guy who we came out of the fire with on this.
Well, okay. So I'll take a minute and try to put a positive spin on it. It's like, it's hard, but here's what I can come up with. He's 62, which I know well because he's 2 years younger than, or 2 weeks younger than I am.
Okay.
So I don't imagine that he's going to be a 15-year, 19-year head coach like some of their previous guys were. So I don't think we're going to be saddled with him forever. It may even be something along the lines of, a reset while they wait for some of the younger guys in the league they really like to get into position to be real viable, in their opinion, head coach candidates. For all I know, they love Udinsky and they just thought he's not quite ready to be there yet. They're not ready to hire a 30-year coach yet, but maybe in 2 years when Mike McCarthy retires, rather than not get his contract renewed, you might be able to get that guy. That's one. Two is he may not have drafted and developed a quarterback, but he has had quite a list of quarterbacks that he has worked with as either quarterback coach, offensive coordinator, or head coach. They include Joe Montana, Dak Prescott, Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre. Really made something of Rich Gannon. I think that's probably the biggest success story that he had, turning Rich Gannon from sort of an afterthought NFL draft prospect to be an actually pretty good pro with a nice career. Even Alex Smith a little bit. There have been guys that he has worked with and figured out a way to do something positive with that I can't not give him credit for. I just, it feels like, my opinion was, what they really needed was someone who's going to reset the thinking, the mentality of the franchise and get away from, we drifted from Noel, who was creative, viewed both sides of the ball as being, important and about the preparation on both sides of the ball, was not interested in winning on emotion. He thought that was the way that bad teams or that teams fail. And then you move to Cowher, who was, more emotion and very passionate Yinzer, so those things going for him in terms of the local fan base. But he also had a degree of, was very hands-on involved in teaching players and, developing them. They were really great at developing players under his tenure. And then you move to Tomlin, who moved away from player development and moved away from teaching mostly and moved into more winning on emotion and, basically pressing the buttons, treating the team in a way to get their emotional response. And that was very successful. And I think as a head coach with certain kinds of team and players, you can be successful doing that. But I felt like this is, people who are you guys' age and younger, or in that age group, rather, more or less, you forget. Well, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know that what transpired before in the franchise that made them really successful. And what was Steelers football? Steelers football was, drafting really well, developing players, and being at the forefront of how to prepare players and how to attack other teams' weaknesses. And that's the thing we've slowly moved away from. And by the end of Tomlin's tenure, we've completely moved away from it. So this signals a return more or less back to that with someone who's better at X and O's on offense.
And there's ways to like poke holes and we could just shit on McCarthy all day. The only thing I'll say, because you're not wrong about like all the quarterbacks he's been with, but the issue I kind of have with that is like, you don't need your head coach to be the quarterback guru. Your quarterback, it could be an OC. It could be a damn offensive assistant, which we won't even hire out. It could be your damn quarterback coach. Like, there's a lot of guys who could get a lot out of a quarterback where, it's not like I hate McCarthy as like a human and as a coach. Like, if I could have 1000% been sold on, okay, Nathan Shieldhouse is going to be the head coach. McCarthy's going to be the OC, assistant head coach. And I could have 100% been behind, okay, McCarthy's going to kind of help keep him on the straight line, help him with, all the head coach problems that you don't really understand. Maybe Shieldhouse has never called plays, but McCarthy has for years. So that could be a great merger. The thing is why it feels so off the other way is like, maybe right now it looks like the Browns are going to hire Shieldhouse. Maybe we end up with him as OC. Like, that's possible. But then in 2 years, if we have a good offense, now you're going to have to go out and find an OC yourself. I think that's part of the problem, and that's assuming McCarthy, again, gives up play calling, and that the thinking on the top of the team where he's been, blamed as an OC for being a conservative play caller, that's just when that's the driving force of the team, when that's the team philosophy, it's a lot easier to like deal with that kind of stuff when they're an assistant coach. But it's just so much harder for me to stomach it when he's, the forward thinker. Like, he's the thinker. He's the one with the ideas for what the franchise is going to be. So, like I said, we'll see how the OC hire. Honestly, the deal with the OC is going to 100% sway how I feel about this, because if he gives up play calling, then okay, then let's have at it. But if he doesn't, then I don't know.
I was going to say, if they hire Shieldhouse as offensive coordinator and literally make him the assistant head coach, or make it known that he's the coach in waiting, that I don't mind that as much as without him. But the thing is, you're banking on that guy turning down a head coaching job if he gets offered one. And I'm not saying he will, because I actually think Grant Dudinsky is going to get that job in Cleveland, I think. But I would say that, if you can at least bring in someone who's young and has that connection to the McVay tree, and is going to add something to the mix, then okay, I could see it being a transitional move where they're like, literally, if they sign him to a 3-year contract, that's what they're talking about now, is a 3-year contract, which really means 2, because at the end of the second year, you either have to extend a guy, so he's not a lame duck coach like he was in Dallas his last year there, which is awful for everybody. And I'm sure he's not going to be willing to do that again. Or he resigns at the end of the 2 years and says, I'm retiring at age 64, going on 65. So if that's the transitional move, and they think, oh, well, we're going to get Aaron Rodgers back for a year or two, and while we have Mike McCarthy, or maybe we're going to draft a quarterback this year, play Aaron Rodgers 1 year, and then Mike McCarthy is in the room and with Aaron Rodgers to develop the next guy, and get you handed off to the next head coach and the next ownership change or whatever they're going to do. If this is all just a transitional move, okay, it makes slightly more sense. But man, considering the options that they had in front of them, I don't know. I guess if they'd hire a younger guy that they don't love long term, then they're really going to be married to that guy. It's going to be hard for them to fire someone like that after 6 years.
I don't see why, though. It's the same thing. I don't get why you don't draft a quarterback every year. Like, if you don't think you have your guy, then it is what it is. I will say, and I'll kind of see what Jeremy thinks about this. Just you saying that, kind of got me thinking. In a world where they bring in McCarthy, and it's really a 2-year contract.
In a land. Yeah. It's like
and it's like, okay, you're going to get 1 more year with Aaron Rodgers. So we're not going to sell the ship. You tell Cam Hayward, like, we're not going to blow everything up. We're not going to, like, go out and, like, be big buyers, but you're going to get your chance to do what you think this team could do. This team was a playoff team. If you think you could do that much better than Tomlin and you think that you've got the defensive pieces where you bring in a new DC and get more out of it, you get your chance to make a run this year. Then Rodgers is basically going to be done after that. You're going to treat his second year as a complete blow-up year. Trade out everyone. Be fine sucking for a year. Tell Nate Scheelhaase, hey, and part of this plan includes Nate Scheelhaase as OC. I should have prefaced with that. Tell Nate Scheelhaase, listen, get as creative as you want. Figure out the shit that you think might work in the NFL for the next couple of years. Like, you're safe. Like, don't worry about offensive performance. We're being horrible this year to get a high pick, and we're getting as many picks as possible in case we need to trade up, juggle all that stuff. Then 2 years is up. McCarthy resigns. You promote up Scheelhaase right in the offseason where you've got a bunch of high picks. You give McCarthy and Rodgers a year to try and pursue something. You get another year where you can basically just, okay, now we're hitting the reset button. McCarthy's a vet. He got his year to shine. Now he'll understand kind of transitioning things over. That would be a very potentially smarter than just hiring Scheelhaase straight up. I'll say that you give him Scheelhaase 2 years of OC experience, which he doesn't have. That would be smart. But again, we could get an ESPN notification in 30 minutes that Scheelhaase has been hired as a head coach.
Right.
And then McCarthy's calling plays. And then it's just going to be like, oh, wow, no, they are just that stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say something else, but I actually saw something interesting that I thought I might bring up because it might be relevant to our structure moving forward. The Steelers are hiring, what's his name here? Tim Gribble to the scouting department. I just saw this.
Hey, he's from Pittsburgh. How about, of course they had to hire him.
Is he?
They're trying to hire every person who's ever had an NFL job who has ties to Pittsburgh.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. But I didn't know if that was in correlation with the fact that Weidl is interviewed for the Atlanta general manager position. I don't know if he might be taking over a similar position. So not saying that the two are related, but I thought it was worth noting since I just saw it on my bookmarks from earlier when I was going through stuff. But yeah, I think it's going to, you guys have kind of hit the nail on the head. Mike McCarthy could be fine depending on the staff he brings in, and I think that's the big caveat. He already has some ties on the current staff. I'm not saying that they will keep anyone on the current staff. I know they basically have told those guys to go look for their jobs. However, Scott McCurley, our inside linebackers coach, was actually his inside linebackers coach at Dallas. So not saying that'd be a good or a bad thing, but you have to wonder if that might be a holdover from the prior staff of Mike Tomlin's. A few other names that got mentioned, not on this staff, but others. But Bears defensive back coach Al Harris has been a hot candidate for some defensive coordinator positions. That might be an interesting addition to throw into the ring for defensive coordinator. I mean, who do you guys really think? I mean, I don't know. It's kind of, snap react here on guys that McCarthy knows that could be in. I mean, who are even guys on your guys' list to even try to fill out his staff right now?
Well, honestly,
go ahead. You first.
That's good because I just kind of assumed that we were going with Shula this whole time. Like, I really thought I was basically locked and loaded. So I was like, I don't really care who our DC is because it's going to be the Shula show.
Right.
The only thing I really care about, bring in someone who's actually like, our guys need to be moving around more. There's no reason we can say the stat TJ Watt gets chipped more than any other player, blah, 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 which Myles Garrett passed him up anyways. But we could say that, but like, that's our own fault. Like, we put him in positions to get chipped all the time. You help your guys get in positions to succeed. You don't just you're not like the Texans where you have the dudes all across. Just because you paid a lot of money for your players doesn't mean you got the dudes to go and just line it up and do similar stuff. Like, they do a good job changing the picture, apparently. But The defense has been a critical issue. It shouldn't be when you have as much money into it as you can. But if you're paying this much for this defense, just finding someone who's going to be creative enough to get the most out of it instead of just you know, relying on what they have. It's kind of like imagine you have a car that you're trying to race, like in street races and stuff. It's like you could have the fastest, best car, right? You put a lot of money into it, but if you just throw an average driver behind the wheel, like a Terrell Austin or Mike Tomlin, you're going to get, solid results, but you're never going to be the best. If you give someone a decent car, maybe not like a completely average car, but like something that can drive, something that's nice, but then they're an amazing driver, they're going to win the race. That's just have the confidence to go with someone who isn't just going to be, we're going to play solid football. Like have someone who's willing to go out there and try and create turnovers, try and create chaos, because that's what all the best defenses are doing.
Right. Will, you were going to add something?
Oh, I was just trying to remember what's the Steelers coach, defensive coaching assistant who coached the Senior Bowl team. He was the head coach of the Senior Bowl a couple of years ago, last year. I've totally forgotten now his name, but he was somebody that was sort of on that one of those lists of, younger defensive assistants around the league. And it just made me think that, they were sort of priming him to move up. But, I don't know. If Dan Quinn had gotten fired, as was rumored with the Washington team, that would have been the first name at the top of the list, because Mike McCarthy was the guy that fought for Dan Quinn to stay when Dan Quinn was getting fired by Jerry Jones. So that would have been like a sort of obvious fit. But, without that, is it Denzel Martin, maybe?
That name rings a bell.
I'm not sure.
It could. Yeah.
Yeah. Just let's see here. Yeah, it wasn't Gerald Alexander. I think it was somebody else. But at any rate, I think it's very unclear. The offensive side of it, I think you might see someone. I'm just not sure how many people are in that position that Shieldhouse is in, where they're not a coordinator now, so you could actually bring them, right? That's a tougher, deeper pool of candidates. Like I'm not positive where they're coming from. Is Davis Mills actually an offensive coordinator right now? Because that would be a name that's been talked about getting OC jobs that hasn't been hired yet. And I feel like if you're gonna have Mike McCarthy, that you really want to have. Personally, I'd say you want to have a defensive coordinator and an offensive coordinator who are young and up and coming rising stars. And at the worst case, they have assistants that are going to come with them that are those guys. As to who those names are, I mean, this is so out of the blue that I really wasn't thinking about who those guys are. And like I said, to me, in the course of this process, Shieldhouse, Shula, and Grant Udinsky are the three guys that came out of this for me, aside from the Kubiaks that we already knew about, that who are really, I feel like the next wave of coaches that we're going to see in the league. Mm-hmm. But out of those, only Shieldhouse is eligible to make a move as an offensive coordinator. The rest, or as a coordinator, the other two are already under contract, so that's not happening.
Just to toss a name out, well, what would you all think about Raheem Morris?
As a DC, that'd be okay.
Yeah.
What about what's the rumor on Saleh? Saleh I've liked more than a lot of others.
Saleh is now the head coach of the Tennessee Titans.
Oh, they did do that. Oh,
yeah. Speaking of brutal hires,
right?
One's better than. I think that's better than McCarthy. But
that's better than McCarthy. The
thing about McCarthy for this job is, I mean, I am sure that his pitch when he came in to do his interview is that he bleeds black and gold. That he's a Steelers fan from birth, and that he has that same sort of passion that the fan base has. And so I'm sure that I have no doubt that he is loyal to a fault, loves the Rooneys, loves Steeler football. He thinks, they think he's going to bring us back to Steeler football, whatever that means, right? That thing that I think is different. Getting back to what I said in the first place, it really depends on your generation of Steeler fandom, what you perceive as being Steelers football. I think Mike McCarthy and I are imprinted with the Chuck Noll era more so than Bill Cowher or Mike Tomlin. But I think I can imagine that's like that's like talking about Vince Lombardi to you guys. Like it's not real.
You
But
want to know? You want to know what'll be really curious is if this hire goes like really shitty, is in like 2 or 3 years, what agent talk's going to come out about who in the Steelers building liked McCarthy,
yeah,
and if like Shieldhouse or like Shula's doing really well, you'll start seeing the Twitter notifications from Schefter pop up about how, oh yeah, Weidel was completely against the McCarthy hire. Like, I'm really
yeah,
curious to see in the future if this goes bad, because no one's going to say anything if it goes well, who was
yeah.
on what side.
Well, let me give you some. These are take them for what they're worth. They're adjacent to the situation rumors. So
Okay.
the way I heard it was, and to a certain extent, some of these are from inside the NFL to a degree, or at least NFL adjacent. That Rooney, the senior, loved Brian Flores, and that was his guy. He already wanted to hire Flores if anything happened with Mike Tomlin. And that, would not shock me if that was the candidate that he really pushed based on everything that happened after Mike Tomlin resigned and even some of the talk midseason and so on. I heard that Danny Rooney was more a fan of Shieldhouse and the idea of having a younger guy like that who was offensive, from that McVay tree and so on, and that Khan was the guy who goes back with McCarthy. So Khan and Weidel worked with McCarthy and probably vouched for him enough that they, that when he came in for his interview and pressed the right buttons for Art Rooney, which I would think he could, because he
can talk like
he's a good salesperson that way. And maybe they were looking for somebody, and by they I mean Art Rooney, who really was the decision maker here, looking for somebody that the fans won't hate, that they'll somehow identify with, and that you will get back to this, away from this thing of like their fans are interested in the head coach leaving. I don't know. Best I can come up with, guys.
Again, like the thing is, I think a lot of fans and it's like we're doing this maybe slightly prematurely, just because like the OC is really the big hinge of this hire. Like if he's calling plays, like if you bring in Shieldhouse, this hire I would say is like a B minus. Like I would have been fine with the younger guy, but you're clearly posturing to get like Shieldhouse up there, or some other offensive assistant, right? Some other offensive assistant who hasn't called plays. Like clearly you're trying to get a stepping stone. But if that's not the case, it's like a D hire. Like it's just not, there's nothing to it other than everything you already had in terms of winning and then not being able to execute in playoffs and stuff like that.
It's running it back. If you think that they were just so close last year and it just didn't work out for them in the end, then it's a good hire, because that is what it is in essence. It's like, okay, we're not, like you said, we're not going to go to TJ Watt and Cam Hayward and all the older guys and be like, hey, we're going to start over, or we're going to build this team for a new young quarterback, and we're going to move forward into the future. And thank you for your service. If you want to go somewhere else, I'm happy to try to accommodate you. It's not going to be any of that. They're like, we were so close last year, and all we need to do is just, press a couple buttons on offense, and we're going to be better. And Aaron Rodgers is going to take us to the promised land. That's the same pitch we're going to get, and it sickens me, because the opportunity cost. It's not even it's going to be suddenly they're going to be terrible and win 5 games. It's like the opportunity cost is immeasurable if you end up losing out on guys who are potentially better long-term solutions.
Yeah, well, and then to build off that, because it's been probably the most important question is, what is going to happen with Mike McCarthy at quarterback? We're in the exact same position last year. Are we going to have to wait till June to get another commitment from Aaron Rodgers? Like, we're seriously right back to where we were last year. Are we going to have to wait till June, another ayahuasca dark cave retreat on whether he wants to come play for another year? Like that question has to get answered fairly quickly, and at least by the start of free agency, because we know Mason Rudolph ain't the guy. We don't know anything about Will Howard because of how little he got to play this year, and even in training camp with his injury, we thought he looked very good. So is Will Howard potentially a guy they look at? I mean, it's not like there's too many free agent quarterbacks that are like must go get guys. I know people are, kind of interested in the Malik Willis idea, even though there's no Green Bay connection there. I want to point that out between McCarthy and Willis, and I want people to get confused there. McCarthy's gone a long time before Willis even showed up in Green Bay. So that's still the biggest question. We've said, yeah, we need to find out who the coordinators are, all that. We don't have any clue who we are at quarterback. It's not going to matter who we bring in at offensive coordinator. Like we have to have a plan there. So what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I've been of the opinion for a long time that until you have a top 5 level quarterback, you should probably be taking a quarterback in the first 4 rounds every year.
Okay.
Like just dart after dart after dart. And at some point within 10 years, you should have figured out at least one. Like these guys do come along, and especially, sometimes teams can't develop, but a lot of teams, they take one guy, and it's like with Pickett, you kind of just, we got to trust him. It's like, no, treat it like a college room. Like just because you have a stud in the room doesn't mean you can't bring in another, and doesn't mean they can't compete. Like I don't get why this thing in the NFL, I understand a little bit with like Ben, where it's like, oh, you're drafting my replacement. I can understand that mentality for like a Hall of Famer, but like what did Kenny Pickett ever do to like, oh, what, you shook his confidence? It's like if that shakes your quarterback's confidence, then maybe he needs to step up to the plate and play better. Or if that rattles him that bad, then that's just not your guy. Like that's my opinion. So my suggestion would be take 2 quarterbacks this year. Don't re-sign Aaron Rodgers. Bring in Will Howard, and then however it shakes out in preseason, it shakes out, which I know they won't do. They'll have a vet ready, even if it's not Rodgers. But you're kind of just wasting your time, because winning a Super Bowl without a top 5 QB, it's like you have to have had incredible drafting luck and success through the defensive side of the ball. You better have your O lineman signed. You better have you have to have a lot of things go right to have a Super Bowl team without a top 5 quarterback. So you're just wasting time if you're not trying to fix that until then. So I have a feeling they'll just Rodgers will come back. They'll have Will Howard. They'll sign Mason Rudolph or a Mason Rudolph type again. But it's I would rather just draft 2 quarterbacks and let 3 guys under 25 duke it out in training camp. And one of them will probably be decent. I mean, how often do we see backups who aren't even that good have solid stretches in the NFL? I bet you if you played 3 backup quarterbacks at different points throughout the year, you'd probably end with a winning record.
2019, my friend.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Like it's
right.
that you can win games like that. So
yeah, I don't know. Like I feel like this draft, they got 12 draft picks, right? That's what it looks like they're going to have, and it's pretty nice. A lot in the top 100. So that is the kind of haul you use to build a team. But I kind of feel like what we're really gonna find out here is how they view the future, not about this year. I think we've already determined that what they want for this year is the same as last year, run it back. Mm-hmm. That's what it sounds like. And this tells me Mike McCarthy coming makes me nearly 100% sure that Aaron Rodgers is coming back. So it's a question of, do they use these 12 picks to say, okay, great, we're going to run it back this year, but what we're doing simultaneously, since we're never going to totally rebuild, is we're going to build, we're going to change the bottom of this roster a lot and try to increase the talent level at the bottom of the roster and bring some young guys into the fold while we still have these vets around and slowly promote them into positions. But I think it's like I don't know if you guys are hockey fans, but the thing with Mike Sullivan when he was the coach of the Penguins was a very similar situation to Tomlin. And the thing that I think he did the most disservice to the team was he refused to let younger players have important roles at the expense of the veterans that he trusted. And I think that became a Steelers thing under Tomlin. Those two coaches were very similar that way. So if one thing could happen as a positive of Mike Tomlin leaving, that even could happen despite the fact that we don't love the Mike McCarthy hire at all. But if they just had the mentality of like, hey, you know what, we're gonna play not only the best players are gonna play, but anybody that we think is on an upward trajectory, who maybe this week is not as good as the guy that we want him to be, but by 2 or 3 weeks into the season is going to be better for us, long term than this veteran. Then I feel like it's a positive move, because that's the way good NFL teams operate. But we have a lot of players in Pittsburgh who are sort of, in a way, placeholders. They're not bad enough to replace, but they're not good enough to not be thinking, hey, we need to eventually put a better player in this spot. And for me, the example is, obviously, like a guy like Patrick Queen. I feel like Patrick Queen is good at a certain thing, but he is definitely upgradable. So the question is, because you have Patrick Queen, does that mean you're not going to draft any linebackers? They have Peyton Wilson, who they've already sort of sidelined. I'm not sure if he's the guy either, but at least he's young. And they were playing Malik Harrison over top of him because they were so desperate to not, be weak against the run. So is linebacker not in play for the Steelers because of Patrick Queen? That would be dumb. That just, you could extrapolate that across the whole roster.
Gotcha. Yeah. Kind of going off something Korey said, drafting a quarterback every year, heck, maybe even taking 2 this year or whatever. The only thing that sucks about that is it's a bad quarterback class. And I don't mean that saying badly, as more just there's barely enough bodies to go in this draft, because so many have opted to forego and go back next year. I mean, there's literally Fernando Mendoza, Ty Simpson, Trinidad Chambliss, which is an if at this moment because he's suing the NCAA for 1 more year of eligibility. Garrett Nussmeier, Taylor Green, Carson Beck, Sawyer Robinson, Clade Klubnik, and Cole Payton, and Drew Aller, just because you texted about him.
But in all seriousness, if you look at Patrick Mahomes, had RPMs on it, showed a lot of flash in college, but was not a polished prospect. Lamar was seen as a run first, couldn't really drive the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Allen, super raw. Yes, you're going to have Anthony Richardsons, and you're going to have Will Levis's, and you're going to have other guys who can spin the shit out of the ball, and they don't figure out the processing part.
Mm-hmm.
But those guys end up being those guys because they just have gifts that others don't have.
I get that.
I don't care. We poke a lot of shit at Drew Aller. That's why I say take 2. Fuck it, take Drew Aller. He can spin the ball. He's a big body. See if he can figure it out in the NFL. See if he can figure it out with NFL reps and NFL coaching, because God knows that it's not like Penn State's been a QB factory the past few years. See if you can figure it out. And if he can't, guess what? Take Drew Aller and Taylor Green.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't pan out. Next year, take the next 2 most athletic, most gifted quarterbacks you could find. And at some point, you're going to land on someone who is like, oh my God, they can read a field.
Unless you're completely unable to develop a quarterback.
Exactly.
Which isn't a separate problem.
Yeah, which has been our issue. So,
I 100% agree with Korey. In fact, I think I might have even be the person that put that into his head. But I feel like, you just keep betting on guys that have the tools. And even if the knock on them is you're not sure about their decision making or their processing, that's perfectly fine to be unsure about that guy and draft him. The issue becomes where you take those guys in the draft. And my contention is, teams overdraft, and that puts more risk into the pick. So it's sort of like especially with there's no quarterbacks in this draft, quote unquote, with that mentality going into it, it's really going to push up guys that are like this. I don't know if it's going to push up, guys who probably have a nice career as a solid backup in the league. Like Mark Gronowski was not a name you mentioned, but I could see Mark Gronowski having at least an AJ McCarron kind of career in the NFL. So if that's the case, then he may be worth a late draft pick, but it doesn't really fit with what you're talking about. To be, the Steelers of the last 10 years would most likely have selected Carson Beck or somebody who's feels like they have a higher floor. and not really thought about trying to hit big. So
Hey,
that's what I would say about what Korey is saying is like swing big, just don't pick that guy like at Kenny Pickett point of the draft. Pick that guy at like the Malik Willis part of the draft.
take Taylon Green in the third, and I'll be like, unless you just botched your first two picks, I'd be like, okay, I feel really good about that. Maybe he stinks, but like a lot of quarterbacks stink. Like that's the part that I don't get the fear in these. Like take the toolsy guy in the second or third, and if they're bad, they're bad. But like at least you took a swing. Like taking Kenny Pickett's not a swing. That's we want to be okay. We want an okay offense. Like take a guy who can elevate everything else, and then if he doesn't, then that's where you have a backup in which you can find a backup anywhere. You can sign a backup for $3 million any year now, and they'll be able to. If you have that good of a roster, a Nick Foles type can take you there. But if you don't have that good of a roster, you better be swinging for the ceiling raisers, because if not, you're never going to do anything. You're not going to outduel these guys for 3 straight weeks in the playoffs.
Right. Well, I think we're all kind of on consensus. We're all in a wait and see mode now, which we were before, but now just to a lesser degree. It's going to be interesting to see how Mike McCarthy fills out his staff, let alone this roster. Let's not act like quarterback's the only hole on this roster.
But Jeremy, just quickly, can you give any kind of like an explanation for why you think they made this announcement today on a Saturday before the conference championships games? Like, what would be the even in your mind, what scenario for a coach that's not in demand, wasn't getting interviews anyplace else? Why announce that today? That's the part that I'm really unsure of.
I actually have a theory on that. It's because Aaron Rodgers on Super Bowl Sunday is going to say he's going to come back so he can steal further spotlight in the NFL calendar. I'm just joking, but yeah,
you had me. I was like, all right,
yeah, like that's kind of like the movie-esque crap that you could spin there, but no, I'm with you. I didn't understand why we had to make such a quick move unless we know that like Shieldhouse was going to take the job in Cleveland and someone was more like, unless we like through back channels somehow knew that Chris Shula was actually going to take this job over the Pittsburgh job. Like, and maybe that's stuff we don't know. Maybe there's stuff out there. There's rumblings that's like, well, Chris wants to go to a better situation where there's a little bit more of a quarterback figured out, where he can bring in his own OC and stuff. And we were like, well, at least we know we have what we have with Mike McCarthy. He's had some. Well, I mean, let's not act like Mike McCarthy hasn't had success. Like, there are positive ways to look at it. Don't get me wrong, but I agree with you. The timing of it is very peculiar. Unless we knew other candidates were going to go to the other place, because like Flores already re-upped in Minnesota in case he didn't get hired this round. So that's the only reason I can think of that we possibly knew through outside channels that we were gonna miss out on some of the other guys that like we wanted to give second interviews to. We just said, let's go with Mike. We know him; he's a Pittsburgh guy. There's no reason to delay it anymore.
I think that you're kind of right, Jeremy.
Yeah.
I honestly think they just knew they wanted McCarthy, and it got to the point where they were so convicted, that strong in their conviction, I guess, that they were just like, you know what, we're gonna hire him. Because the only thing that kind of throws that off is it's kind of like draft season, where you can believe a lot of the rumors you read up until about a week out, and then to believe nothing because it's all agent talk. And the reason why I say that I don't think your theory is right, at least, is that, which is it's not that it's like wrong for any specific. It makes no sense to not at least talk to them. But their agents were getting, or Adam Schefter was reporting due to their camps or whatever, that Shula really impressed in the interview and Shieldhouse was super impressive in the Steelers interview. That's the agent going to Schefter and being like, hey, let's get the masses drummed up. So that's the only reason. I think that Shula, Shieldhouse, and McCarthy all really wanted the job. I think that Buffalo wasn't going to hire any of them. I think that or as far a Buffalo hiring Shula would be interesting, but Buffalo wasn't going to hire any of them, and I think that all three of them wanted the job. I think Shieldhouse definitely wanted the Browns are really just like a lesser version of that Steelers job right now. You just get more stable ownership for the most part, even if the rosters are kind of squirrely all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was really they were just so strong in their belief that they wanted McCarthy that they were like, you know what? Why wait? We're just gonna put this out there.
Yeah, but I
Yeah,
feel like they were in this position with Russ Grimm last time around. You guys are old enough to remember that, right?
I don't know
I
actually. I
do.
tried
I
to I
do
tried to
remember.
look him up, and I didn't really know anything about what
So
it.
Russ Grimm was the offensive line coach for the Steelers.
Yeah.
And during the hiring process, when Cowher left, he was considered to be the in-house candidate that was likely to get the job. And in fact, he or his agent or news media or whatever announced that he was going to be hired as the Steelers head coach, and then the next day or something they announced Mike Tomlin was getting the job. So it was sort of like we went through this whole process of reacting and so on and so forth. And if the Steelers themselves hadn't put up a notice that said that they had agreed verbally, with Mike McCarthy, and even that agreed verbally, there's still outs. But what happened was that they Mike Tomlin came in very late in the process after they'd probably already told Russ Grimm he'd done great and he was right now he's their pick to be the head coach, and somehow that turned into like he got offered the job or there was a misunderstanding about it or whatever. But then Mike Tomlin came in late in the process and wowed them, and it sort of felt like why not leave yourself the opportunity to be wowed? Why not wait until the Rams are done and let those two guys come in person and see them in person and give yourself the opportunity to be wild. And if you're not, hire Mike McCarthy anyway. Mike McCarthy's not going anywhere. That week, maybe 2 weeks, it would cost you doesn't really mean anything. It's like really in the process. I'm not sure how much advantage there is to hiring a head coach right now versus after the Super Bowl even. But
Yeah,
that's me.
I mean, look, just looking at the jobs that are still open, like obviously the Buffalo job looks better than Pittsburgh. You have Josh Allen, you have a franchise quarterback. Who doesn't want to go?
Ownership's wackadoo in Buffalo, so that's that.
Yeah, talk about some weird shit with the Keon Coleman stuff the last few days. Wow. But obviously the Buffalo job is very attractive because of Josh Allen. I mean, the Raiders have still not hired anyone, and they have the number 1 overall pick, likely to pick my guy Fernando Mendoza, to start, a new era of Raider football, hopefully there. I mean, then you have the Browns and the Cardinals, who the Cardinals actually look like they may be very interested in hiring Anthony Weaver, a guy that Pittsburgh, I think, interviewed twice for this opening job. So it's not like there were that many other jobs for like Shula and Shieldhouse and some of these other candidates to take. So it's just interesting or whatever. Well, like you said, with the timing of it, like we could have waited on Mike McCarthy for another 2 weeks. Like he wasn't interviewing anywhere else, but it is what it is. I mean, it depending on what the Browns do with Shieldhouse, Shula may end up just going back to the Rams and trying to get next cycle. That I think that's the other part with the agent speak that Korey was talking about with these releases or whatever. They're obviously not going to put out there that he did a horrible job interviewing or like, yeah, we don't think he, or, it's like, they're not going to say that. They're not going to go out there and be like, well, we didn't think he was quite ready yet. They're going to be like, yeah, he was an impressive young man, who we were very glad we at least kicked the tires on.
I mean, just if nothing else, if the plan is that he's an interim, he's a transitional head coach for them, 62, he's going to be here 3 or 4 years, then why not see these young guys who are too young? Like, why not bringing Gudinski into the room is just mind blowing to me because, okay, the guy's 30. So if you even if you don't think he's the guy you're going to hire right now, get him in the room and let him talk to you for 3 hours or even virtually talk to you for 3 hours so that the next time you have a head coach hiring, which is probably sooner than 15 years with Mike McCarthy in the room, then you'll know more about this guy. Like what they should have used this opportunity to interview a shit ton of young candidates that they didn't intend to hire with the hopes that one of them might blow them away, or if not, file it away for later. Same as they would with draft interviews, the people that they bring in for visits. Same exact.
It's like worst case, you got to beat into what these coaches think when you eventually play them. Like worst case, like, and it's like if you're a guy like Khan or Weidel, like you're gonna have to do this again if you think that your careers are going well. Like Weidel, if he wants to be a GM, like they should have tried to have like 50 interviews. Like, why not get more interviews? Why not get as much information as possible?
Yeah, that would only be efficient and make a lot of sense. So that's exactly why they probably didn't do it. But well, gentlemen, thank you for joining us here in Steeler fans on another episode of the end of season episode for the 25-26 season, where we've seen a lot happen. We saw Mike Tomlin, make another playoff appearance, but lose epically as usual. Yep. Thank you, Wil. For those of you who aren't watching us via video, Wil has a great background from South Park. Kenny's dad, whose name is escaping me, but he just says things are never going to change around here. And that kind of feels, what the Mike McCarthy hire kind of feels like. But thank you all for joining us here for another for the end of the season episode for the 25-26 season. Tip of the hat to Mike Tomlin. I know we've been wanting change for the last several years, but thanks for 19 pretty good years. You won us a Super Bowl. I'm more than willing to give you your flowers. You never had a losing season for as much as we gave you shit about it. It's a cool little stat that you can ride off into the sunset with. Thanks for bringing the Killer Bees together for several years, even though I can't imagine what that locker room was like. We've had some fun times with Mike Tomlin. So thank you, Mike, for your service. I hope retirement suits you well. And if you don't mind, please come back and want to coach in a year or two so we can get some draft compensation for you.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, and then one last thing to you guys, who's going to win the Super Bowl? Only 4 teams left. You got the Patriots at Broncos tomorrow and the Rams at the Seahawks. Who's winning the Super Bowl? Wil, I'm going to you first.
The easy answer is whoever wins the NFC Championship.
That's a cop-out
but that's
answer,
that's a harder question. They've had some battles this year already.
They have.
And that winning the third game for this kind of situation is usually pretty rough.
Mm-hmm.
As great as Seattle's run has been, and as good as their defense is, which is incredible, I think the Rams. So I'm going to pick the Rams to win it all.
All right, Korey, who do you think you have winning the Super Bowl this year?
Well, Wil took the words out of my mouth. Not the AFC. I'll definitely go. I don't know. I think the Rams have the better quarterback. I think the Rams are just a really safe pick here. But the Seahawks look really good. I wouldn't be surprised with anything. But I'll go with the Rams.
Yeah, I think we're all in similar cahoots here. NFC winner. I'm going to go with the Rams. They've been my team, kind of the team I've been hyping up the last few years. I think Stafford wins an MVP, wins another Super Bowl, and potentially rides off into the sunset.
But Super Bowl MVP, Puka Nacua. Yeah, okay. Just bet it. If you can bet it now before they play tomorrow,
Fair enough.
I think you might get some pretty good odds on that, and that's a pretty safe bet if they get enough.
Well, thank you all for joining us here. Here we go to the off season and a lot more anticipating of who we're going to bring on staff and how we're going to fill out this roster. Enjoy the off season. We will see you around draft time.